this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin. Redefining the sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. Imagine, if you will, a new benchmark for evil. And kind of let me lay it out to you real quick. You're a person who is involved with another individual who is, at minimum, equally as evil as you are, but maybe a tad bit more. And the police strike a deal with you to testify against the other person. And here's the kicker. This is the best deal you're going to get. If you testify for the state, this is what you're going to receive. A life sentence plus 50 years that must be served in full. Does that spark your interest? Does that give you an indication of how grotesque and horrible the case is that we're about to break down for you? I think it might be a place to start. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Brother Dave, you sat down a few minutes ago, and I could see that look in your eye that you get every now and then, not with every case, but every now and then. And do you remember what I asked you just a second ago?
Yeah. Scrubbing the brain, yeah. Hey, today, we're going to tell you the story about Sean Finnegan and how he is accused of conspiring with his girlfriend, Rebecca Dishman, to lure Jennifer Paxton to his home in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, with the promise of giving her a warm place to stay. However, once Ms. Paxton was in the house, investigators say the couple attacked her with a baseball bat, then raped her and tortured her. And then, during the investigation of all this, they uncovered another crime. This time, Finnegan is separately accused of sexually abusing a child 3 years old or younger. And that occurred in May of 2020. It goes beyond the pale of what we can imagine. But Rebecca Dishman, she's actually going to have to serve an additional 50 years. No matter what else happens, she has to serve an additional 50 years at 100%.
And I don't hear that. I've never heard that term. I know that just because I haven't heard it doesn't mean that people don't say it or it's not part of the mechanism that exists out there. But it was uniquely worded. It was almost like, an exclamation point
right.
on how horrific this is. And, this person that has helped facilitate, I think that you and I could both say, was one of the most horrific cases that we've heard of. It certainly ranks up there with anything that we have covered. She's only 25, Dave. Put that in perspective. This young lady, her name is actually Rebecca Dishman, who had to testify in this case. She's only 25. So she's looking at literally a lifetime, right?
Right.
I think the top end for women in the United States is 78 on average. Just do the arithmetic there, and you get an idea of how long she's going to be behind bars for that period of time. And then on top of that, this 50 years. And Dave, I'll go ahead and say that I don't know that you can compare the two crimes here that we're talking about. They're both sexually motivated. And but the one for 50 years actually involves the rape of a child that's 3 years of age or younger, Dave.
Yep.
And this woman helped facilitate that. And it would appear that the primary suspect that she's testifying against actually facilitated this. And she's an adjunct to this at 25 years of age. Go ahead and kind of break this down to us, man, because I got to tell you.
When the secondary story to what we're talking about today takes up this much time at the beginning, it shows you the shocking nature of this particular crime. Our victim is a 36-year-old woman named Jennifer Paxton. Jennifer Paxton is lured by Rebecca Dishman, who's 25, and Sean Finnegan, who's 56 years old and works in a bar in Knoxville called The Pint. He and Jennifer Paxton have known one another for a while. She comes into the Pint, uses the restroom. She's kind of a nomad. Her life is it's tough. She does see her family, though. Once a month, she goes by and sees the family, gets some money, and goes back out and does her thing. But Jennifer Paxton is friendly enough with Sean Finnegan and his girlfriend, Rebecca Dishman, that when they invite her to stay with them at their apartment, she takes them up on it. It's December. It's cold as 2019, December of 2019. Now, what happens is the minute Jennifer Paxton walks into that apartment, she enters the gates of hell. They beat her with a baseball bat. They shackle her to a bed, and then they rape her. Now, we don't know at what point in time they killed her. We know they killed her with a ligature. But, Joe, we really don't know when that happened. We don't know how long she was tortured. We know that she went in there sometime in December, between December 1st and December 31st, right?
Yeah, of 2019. This goes back. This is pre-COVID. Going back to that period of time. And here's another little interesting aside about this. Finnegan had been known and was known prior to the COVID pandemic that he had two girlfriends in the past living with him. And I think that's, and people would laugh about that with him, that sort of thing. And they were aware that he had two women that would reside with him, and one eventually left. And so he's in this apartment with Dishman, that they have shared this home together during this period of time. And it's almost, Dave, as if they were looking for a third, perhaps, in whatever the situation is. And it actually reminds me of a case that I covered when I first started body bags, of this luring thing. I had a case in New Orleans that I'd actually worked, where I had a lady that lured a gentleman back to her apartment from a bar. And when they got back to her apartment, her boyfriend was waiting there with a claw hammer and beat this other man to death. And then that couple had sex on top of this guy's corpse. And then they stuffed him into a sofa and turned the air all the way down to try to keep the environment. And this plays into this case as well. Try to keep the environment down at a manageable, cooler level, so that the body would not decay at a normal rate. Of course, it turned out that it didn't work that way, and a psychic actually got involved in that case and actually pointed us to where the body was found, out in a landfill inside of a sofa. So it was a fascinating
That was the New Orleans case. Where
that was the New Orleans case. Yeah. So I've actually seen this happen before. This idea of luring to bring somebody in. And, you have to enter into, you have Dishman and Finnegan entering into a conspiracy together, or a confederacy, certainly, to to try to lure an individual in so that they can use essentially as a plaything. And Dave, that's what actually occurred here. They reduced, people go on and on about the term objectification all the time, with the way, women dress and this sorts of things. This is the ultimate in objectification. You take this poor woman and she literally becomes something less than human in the eyes of her attackers, and they can do anything they want to. And buddy, did they ever in this case?
Now, we know that between December 1st and December 31st of 2019, Jennifer Paxton was murdered.
Yes.
But we don't know the exact date, which means we don't know how long Jennifer Paxton was kept in that apartment alive to be abused, as you mentioned, as a plaything. We know that, and you brought up something very interesting a minute ago, that at the bar where Finnegan works, they use a baseball bat behind the bar. When a fight breaks out, they would bash this bat on the bar to draw attention so that the employees could come and gather and get the fight over with.
Right.
And in this case, a baseball bat was used as the means of beating her about the head. I hate to assume, but I can't imagine any other place on the body where one would be immediately,
Well, that's quite interesting, because when they do obviously examine this poor woman's remains very carefully, and it goes back to something else you and I have talked about that we do in forensics, and that is resolution of injuries. And that's key here, Dave, because listen, this poor woman, the family remembers having seen her and talked to her just prior to Thanksgiving, or right at Thanksgiving, because she would come around she had no means. Okay. She would come around to her grandmother's house, and her grandmother received an SSI check, and grandmother would always give her money.
Now, her grandmother was more of a motherly figure.
She was, and she actually viewed her, according to her other relatives, she viewed her grandmother as her mom. Right. And very sad state of affairs, unfortunately, but that's the life that she had. And many people have issues in their lives, and you can't escape that. And that was her reality. So with her, she would come around, and that's how the family kind of kept track of her. They knew they could set their clock by it. She would come back around at least once a month to collect the check, and she would be seen. Interestingly enough, her cousin had actually testified in this case that she thought she saw her at maybe the end of November or the very beginning of December, walking in the area adjacent to the Pint where Finnegan worked. And she stated at that time that she appeared to be very thin, more thinner than she normally was. And so she kind of drops off of the map at that point in time. And it's at this point in time, when it's, I'm not going to use the word fascinating. It's sickening to think that there are predators that are out there, and this is generally their MO, where they see somebody that is in need of something. And as you'd mentioned, those East Tennessee winters, they get pretty chilly. And she's staring down the barrel of approaching wintertime, late fall, and she needs somewhere to rest her head, somewhere to say that she has safety, somewhere where she can be warm. Unfortunately, it was a monster who was offering these comforts to her.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy. featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin.
Redefining the sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Dave, I got to tell you, I don't know. I've often thought of people that commit these horrific crimes that maybe, just maybe, there's something that numbs them to the humanity of the others that they're inflicting pain upon. And it would seem to me, at least, that Dishman, this woman that was essentially a Confederate of Finnegan, I think that maybe her conscience got the best of her. Maybe she sensed that, and here's the thing, that her time may be up, because she had witnessed some things that if you and I sat down and we were trying to create some kind of story, first off, I wouldn't hope these things would enter into our lexicon or into our minds. But she had borne witness to all of this. And I have to think that it didn't matter where the safety was coming from. She wanted to feel like she was going to be safe, because this guy Finnegan apparently turns out to be pure evil.
Between December 1st and December 31st, she is attacked with a baseball bat. Mm-hmm. She is shackled to a bed and then strangled. But in that process, she was raped and abused. No telling how many times, how many days. We have no way of knowing that right now. And that boggles my mind with everything we have forensically, Joe, that we don't know. We cannot determine exactly what happened during that 31-day period of time in the life of Jennifer Paxton.
Yeah, and it's hard, and I'll give you the reason why. And I find it there. This thing is, it's rather ironic that Miss Paxton was attempting to escape those cold nights that she was faced with in Knoxville, and maybe the danger for those of you all that have never been to Knoxville. Knoxville's a medium-sized town. I mean, it's a university town. Big downtown. You do have a significant homeless population there. There are encampments, that sort of thing. The stuff that you encounter with larger cities anyway. And, you know, the opportunity, can you imagine being somebody living on the streets and then all of a sudden somebody offers you the opportunity to go to Oak Ridge, which is known literally, I tell people this all the time. Huntsville, I think it's Huntsville, Alabama, and Oak Ridge, Tennessee have the highest per capita concentration of PhDs of anywhere in the United States. And it's because Oak Ridge Labs is there, you know, where actually I think the first atomic device was actually developed, or the beginnings of it.
In secret.
In secret, yeah. And so you're going from this kind of squalid environment that you're having to exist in, and somebody says, hey, you want to go to Oak Ridge? It's right down the road. We can take you there. We've got a nice warm place for you to stay. But you know, when Finnegan opened the door to this place and Dishman is there, they begin to attack her. Now, this is coming from Dishman herself. Begin to attack her, and it's at this point in time that they literally chain her to a bed. She is raped upon her arrival there after having been beaten with a bat. So early on in this captivity, she's already sustaining severe physical abuse. The problem is, and this is where the irony comes in, is that after she is killed, Dave, in this apartment, her body is placed into a stand-up cooler. And that's kind of interesting because Finnegan had a relationship with a local rent-to-buy establishment. I think it was Rent-A-Center, if I'm not mistaken. And the actual delivery guy testified in the case. He was given specific instructions, and here's a big clue, to leave. He rented this thing, Finnegan did, a stand-up freezer, leave it on the front porch, we'll bring it in, okay? Most of the time, if I've got a piece of furniture or something like that I'm going to have delivered, I want it all. I want you to bring it in the house. As a matter of fact, I want you to set it up for me and everything. No. You leave it there. I'll get it when I get home. And the salesman, the worker, actually said he was known. Finnegan was known to them, and that he always paid his bills on time. And even where Finnegan worked at the Pint, they said he was a reliable employee, that he was always there. And that just goes to show you, that you don't really know what's going on behind closed doors. Finnegan knew, and he knew that he had a deceased woman on his hands. We think that might be the case. This is the trick, though. Had he premeditated her death, maybe she was still alive in there, and he said, you know what, I'm going to order a cooler, a freezer, if you will, have it brought to the house, and when I do finally kill her, I'm going to store her in there, because her death that these two brought about, that wasn't the end of what they were going to do with this poor woman's remains, Dave. And so our timelines get very much skewed when we're trying to understand the type of trauma she sustained, when she sustained it, and how long it had gone on for. So that piece to this, which is one of the biggest pieces of investigated data that we can collect, a timeline, is all skewed. And that's because her body, when it was finally recovered, was frozen through and through, Dave.
And here's what makes me wonder about everything, Joe. You say she's frozen through and through. We know Finnegan orders the freezer from Rent-A-Center on December 27th, and yet we also know they beat her with a bat, they shackled her to a bed, they raped her, but we don't know when she was murdered. We don't know that exact date. I don't know if there's a way we can even know that. We just know that it didn't happen the first day she was there.
No. This was a lengthy process, and there have been a number of perpetrators over the years that have done this. They've held people captive and have used them as essentially sex slaves, or I go back to this idea of objectification, where you can dehumanize an individual to the point where they become entertainment for these monsters like this. It's really difficult. Now, the answer is going to lie, Dave, in the examination of her tissues, not just in the sense of at autopsy, but also with the histological results that are going to come back. And when I say histology, if our listeners have watched programs where autopsies are being performed, and you see the doctor not necessarily over the body, but over a cutting board, this is where we actually dissect the organs that come out of the body. We take sections of those organs, Dave. And so when we take sections of those organs, they are actually prepared by a histologist who will take a section of an organ, place it in paraffin, a wax block, and they'll begin to slice it. And it's stained a particular way so that there's different types of stains that are used, so that it brings out certain features in the tissue, and you can look at it microscopically. And so a physician will look at these things and begin to get an idea as to the rate of decomposition, perhaps, if there's evidence of decomposition at a cellular level. In some cases, they can determine if a body had, in fact, been frozen. But the trick is to try to do the calculation so that you can ballpark it. And again, that's why we've got this very broad time window here. And I don't know that there's any way that you can narrow it down any further. I don't necessarily think that Dishman aided them in this as to when she was actually killed, when she was actually murdered. We know how this occurred. But Dave, I got to tell you, the torture, the pain, and the trauma that this woman endured for that time that she was with this couple is the stuff of nightmares.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn sensational.
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin.
Redefining this sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
So let's just say you're a police officer and you have information about a missing woman. You have information that indicates that there's a high likelihood that this woman that is missing is in fact deceased. And you go to the suspect's home. You begin to search the home and look through it. And in a closet, there stands a stand-up freezer. Looks like a refrigerator, but it is literally a deep freeze that a small person, and that comes into play here, could actually stand in and the door be closed. But it's empty. It's completely empty. And it appears to be recently cleaned. You're looking around, you get down on your knees and you see something in this bedroom that is beneath a bed. You stick your hand beneath the bed and you recoil in horror. The reason you recoil is because what you're touching beneath the bed is an icy, cold, frozen body. Dave, this blew my mind when I heard this because apparently Finnegan had become aware that the police knew that he had some kind of involvement in Miss Paxton's death. And a lieutenant in this particular case that gave testimony in this trial actually states that he recoiled when he touched the item beneath the bed, and it was apparently covered in plastic. And the reason he recoiled is you don't expect to feel something beneath a bed that is that cold. Just imagine going into your freezer at home and you put your hand on an item inside the freezer and it's warm. That's an indication that either it's been freshly placed in there or your freezer is no longer working. Try to reverse that now and think, well, this isn't a frozen environment, but yet what I'm touching right here is distinctly frozen. I don't know how I would react, but the lieutenant's testimony gave an indication that it was quite shocking to him.
I can't think of anything comparable, Joe, that to find something freezing cold that you expect to be at least room temperature,
Right.
And
Yeah.
knowing they're looking for a body, they are looking for Jennifer Paxton, and seeing something that really does look like I have found her and touching it, knowing it's freezing cold, that would be a freak show. You're beyond anything I can imagine. But once you get past that, I want to go back for a minute because you mentioned the freezer was cleaned out, that there was some type of warning. We know that Jennifer Paxton last seen and murdered sometime during the month of December 2019. This is August of 2020. This is a full 8 months plus later, and Finnegan had been tipped off and is able to move her body from the freezer to under the bed. But can you tell when the body is in the freezer, does it decompose at the same rate as it would at a cellular level if it was in a different place? Is there a way that you can track this? The only thing we really have is we know when the freezer was delivered to his house, but we don't know if she was dead at that time or if he was planning to kill her at that time.
under normal circumstances, which there are very few normal circumstances in any death, but let's just say normal day-to-day life, and we've got an ambient temperature of 72 degrees, because that's when most testing has occurred over the years relative to, in a broad sense, relative to determination of postmortem interval. That's ideal conditions, okay? Now you skew this data where you're not increasing temperature or environmental temperature, you're decreasing it. And you ask a very salient question here regarding the slowing of decomposition. You can never, and I mean never, completely stop decomposition. I would imagine you probably could if you went sub-zero, perhaps. But at a cellular level, I'm so proud of you for using that term, by the way. At a cellular level, you're going to actually still see the process of decomposition going on. It's very difficult to dial it in to the point where you can say, okay, it started here, stopped here, then restarted, because that might be what you're looking at. And let me tell you why. And this is absolutely horrible. There were terrible things that were done to this woman in life, Dave. Trauma that she sustained. And I'm talking about superficial cuts and bruises that are all over her body. But there were things that were done, because we have to keep in mind these two, Finnegan and Dishman, are both charged with the abuse of a corpse. And I'm going to give you a little insight into why they were charged with this. We do know that she had in excess of 50 injuries on her body. Some of these are going to be postmortem insults. Some of these are going to be antemortem insults. And of course, the choking is in addition, because it is, or strangulation with a ligature. This is going to be a perimortem, which means in the throes of death.
The strangulation, hold on. The strangulation happened as she was in the throes of death.
Yeah, because that brings about her death at that moment in time. And so let's just say, for instance, okay, let's say this, for instance, if you have an instance where in the antemortem state, which means in life, you sustain a bruise, okay? In life, you will get a reaction by the tissue. First off, you're going to see hemorrhage appear in the immediate, but then you'll see this kind of restoration begin to take place as those injuries resolve. With a perimortem injury, you can have evidence that there was hemorrhage into a specific area, but no repair started. That's really, that's kind of an oversimplification, but that gives you an idea that that's a perimortem event, that it's happening while blood is flowing. And the ME actually talks about this in this case. She gave a workshop in this, and I'm going to go into this in just a second. But she talks about there was still blood flow into an area, but there's no evidence that anything was being healed or repaired. So that gives you, this is a perimortem event. And of course, everything that you have that's a postmortem injury, you're not going to have any hemorrhage at all. And that goes to like looking at the slides of the sections you take. Dave, I'll go ahead and tell everyone, Miss Paxton's nose was missing. They cut her nose off, just so that folks understand that. And when the police began to look at what they had discovered at the scene, I can only imagine the horror that kind of it. Even as seasoned as I was as a death investigator, this is the type of thing that would give me pause. I would probably have to stand up, walk away, catch my breath, and then go back at it again with my examination and assessment, because the trauma that was inflicted upon her, she had multiple cuts all over her face. She had cuts over the surface of her torso. And Dave, the doctor described that she had a circumferential dissection of one of her breasts where the areola, the nipple, was completely removed on one breast. That means that this individual took this knife, and she stated, the ME did, that he very carefully removed that portion of the breast, and he had gone to work on the other one but never finished. And then there were other injuries that she had on her body that she said were, I don't know, I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but essentially were not as well thought out and were more randomized, if you will. So you have to think she's being tortured while she's alive. The assessment has to come in. How many of these injuries and insults did her body sustain in life that are part of a torturing process with her, Dave? And how much of this, and this is where it goes to, if it can possibly go to another horrific level, where he is actually, we talked about objectification earlier, where he's dehumanizing this poor woman. He's actually going back and playing with the body in a postmortem sense, where he is abusing a corpse. And there's probably a lot more to this from a sexual standpoint. I think the motivation behind this for him to do this, and the idea of retaining anything that is there. What's your rationale for that? Why do you want to do this? Why do you want to hang on to these elements? Why do you want to essentially do this half-assed dissection on this poor, unfortunate soul before you? What is it within your brain that's causing you to do this? I know this, when the chief medical examiner for Knox and Anderson County, she stood up, and Dave, I got to tell you, this was a brilliant move in the courtroom with her. They brought in a posable mannequin that is essentially this white kind of foamy structure that has human form. And Dave, she used these little red felt stick-ons that she had. Those represented all of the cuts. Okay. And when you see this thing, and I urge anybody that can go to YouTube and watch this recreation, it's textbook. She placed the red little felt cutouts all over this woman's body. Then she took black ones and put them all over her body. Those represented contusions where she had been beaten. And they're all kind of interlaced like this all over the remains. And the reporters that were in court, when they were putting these images, the autopsy images up, they said that many of the jury members had to turn away because they could not believe what they were going to say. Even the judge from the bench actually said, "Now, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I've got to warn you," because the judge has already seen all of this. "I've got to warn you, what you're about to see is going to be quite disturbing." And, many times you'll have an attorney, a defense attorney, that will object to this because they'll say that it's prejudicial. I've had to sit in court in pretrial motions and go through hundreds of photographs to try to decide between and having the prosecution and the defense argue over what's the value in the photograph. What's the value in the photograph? It's going to be prejudicial. Dave, you can't escape this in this case because this is the sum total of the case, the trauma that was inflicted upon her.
When it says that her body had slices on her face, back, arms, wrist, hands, abdomen, pelvis, and buttocks. Her nose had been removed with a sharp knife, and the slices were precise. The slices into her abdomen were very deep, but they were considered haphazard, without the opposite of what was seen with the nose. Could this indicate two different people doing this to the body?
Yeah, I suppose it could. Or it could be more, when you have this kind of exactitude, all right, in inflicting these kinds of injuries, that gives me an indication that maybe she's in a postmortem state when that occurs. The horror is when you see this kind of haphazard way of cutting, and this is quite chilling. And the doctor talked about that there were so many injuries that could potentially be evidence of torture. Can you imagine having a knife plunged into your stomach and you're having to lay there with the pain of that, knowing what's going on? And he's not, according to Dishman, Finnegan is not averse to this type of thing. And Dishman actually testified that for her experience with him, he had kept her in a dog cage, sodomized her regularly, defecated and urinated on her regularly. And this was kind of the standard practice for him with Dishman. And that I don't know that she was complicit in these acts. She's 23 years old, so she's not a child. She's an adult, and she's working alongside him. Remember, she's part of the luring here, to get Miss Paxton into this apartment so they can do whatever they want to with her. And it's also important to remember that Dishman entered in as part of this crime with this 3 or under year old child that they sexually abused together. Apparently, it's just it goes so into the depths of the darkest part of human experience. It's almost unmeasurable, Dave.
One of the things that came out at trial was the strangulation, because they still haven't found the baseball bat. And you mentioned to me that the bat from the bar is also missing.
Yes.
So you've got that bat missing. They can't find the bat that was used to beat Jennifer with. But they were talking about the strangulation, what was used for that. And at trial, the state asked the doctor that did the autopsy if a shoelace would be consistent with Paxton's injuries around her neck.
Yeah.
And she said yes. So indicating they believe a shoelace may have been used to strangle her.
Yeah, they actually found a pair of shoes that one of the shoelaces was missing from, and Dishman actually confirmed this. Dishman gave very chilling testimony in this case, in that she watched Finnegan as he choked her with this shoelace. Dishman also stated that she got down on her hands and knees adjacent to this woman to tell her goodbye. She watched her taking her final breaths there before her very eyes. I have to think, Dave, and this is just speculative on my part, that Dishman probably felt like that she was going to wind up in the same way that Miss Paxton had. And I think that's the reason that she bolted and left this place, because, she bore witness to every bit of this. The injuries that were sustained with a baseball bat as a bludgeoning tool, the bat, okay, is kind of interesting because it makes people don't think about the pattern that comes about when anyone's struck with anything. If you think about a flat surface like a piece of angle iron that someone is struck with, that's going to have very distinct margins. But when we think about the barrel of a baseball bat, we're talking it's cylindrical, obviously, and it's tapered too. When someone is struck with a baseball bat, the skin actually kind of rises up over the sides of the bat, and the margins of that contusion are going to look a bit distorted because of the elasticity of the skin. So it will actually appear to be a bit broader than it actually is, but it will have a definitive top margin and bottom margin as the thing begins to taper down. It's the only thing I can really compare it to. I've seen a couple of baseball bat attacks before. In some instances, I've actually seen this bruising pattern or contusion pattern look kind of like a fan, Dave. And if you can imagine that, how a fan kind of opens up like that, and the bat kind of does that because the skin wraps around it when the individual is struck. But suffice it to say, the end of this woman's life was she was not surrounded by people that cared for her. Her grandmother, who had been providing her with money periodically, was not there. Her cousins were not there that might see her on the street every now and then. She died in circumstances that most of us can never imagine and hopefully will never experience. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.